Okay, we're going to get started, guys. Thanks for joining us. So our topic is providing cloud services. And what we want to do is we have three folks here that have different types of services, some from a city perspective, some from State Department perspective, and some from a more commercial corporate perspective. And what we're going to talk about is see what they provided, some of the things, you know, sort of see what they've been doing in that shared service. Then I've got some questions for them to talk about, you know, different things they've learned and things to be aware of so you all can learn. And then we want to open up to questions. If you guys have questions about, you know, anything around shared services, how to do it, what they've run into, you know, good things to do, bad things to do. We really want this to be a learning experience for you guys and be helpful to you, not just us sharing a bunch of information. So we have Bryon from the City of Fresno. We have Jay Kidd from NetApp. He's our CTO, so he runs large organizations with lots of services. And then we have Tim Garza with Department of Water, who's also providing shared services for the resources agency. So let's start with Bryon. If you want to share a few minutes about sort of what you guys are doing on the city level.
Sure. I apologize for my voice. I've got a little bit of a cold. But what we're doing in the City of Fresno, in the Fresno area, is we have an extensive fiber network which is being shared with the City of Clovis and the County of Fresno. And it got started in about 2003 when both Fresno and Clovis had their own traffic information systems, and they were both building out fiber networks. And there was the need to tie the two together because there's some services that needed to be shared. So the two of them tied it together, and we created an MOU. And since then, it's grown. We provide GIS sharing, planned data sharing, public safety, dispatch. Later came on internet access for one of the school districts. It's being shared by the City of Fresno, the County of Fresno, County Sheriffs, Fresno PD, Clovis PD, Fresno Unified School Districts, Clovis Unified School District, County Office of Governments, our local PEG stations. So you can see there's quite a number of people who have gotten on it and who have taken advantage of it. Future plans for it, we're going to have our bus rapid transit system run over it. So what we're doing basically, it's like a public hybrid cloud, if you will. Any public agency who has a need to share the data or access to the other agency can get on. The provisions of the MOU state that it's free of charge. There's no cost. You provide your own security. You take care of your own maintenance, as well as any construction costs that may happen on the system itself. We're always looking for partners and putting more on it. We're putting our video policing system on it, which has a lot of cameras. And because you guys have heard all about the school shootings and whatnot, our police departments are now looking at the local school districts and trying to get access to their cameras. So there's a whole lot of uses for it. And our model in government works pretty well. It works very well because a lot of people in the area have heard about it. One school district, Clovis Unified, they wanted internet access to get away from their T1s, and all we had to do was, a few hundred feet of construction in the parking garage, and they were connected. So through the two networks, the Clovis network and the Fresno network, Clovis Unified is going to be adding more schools onto it. So it's a model where it's shared, it's completely shared. Like I said, the agencies have their own security. It's up to you what you want to put through it. You protect yourself, and there's an agreement in place that we all work pretty well together, and we've had a good relationship, and it's helped build the relationships among the other agencies in the region. So that's kind of what we're doing currently.
All right. Within NetApp, one of the groups I have responsibility for is our overall engineering test organization. And we had a challenge, which I think is more of a generic challenge. We have 4,000 engineers who are developing software, and they needed to test their software. And they needed some specific hardware configurations to test it on, particularly our storage systems. And our capital budget was going up 35 to 40% a year as everybody felt, I need to have my own dedicated equipment, I need my own hardware, I need my own hardware, I need my own hardware. So we finally just told them, no, you can't have it. And we consolidated a pool of test equipment in a single lab in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we told them, you have to make that equipment work to do all your testing. And much wailing and gnashing of teeth and change in attitude, and this can never be. And it took about 2 years, but we were able to get to the point where at half the capital expenditure, we're able to produce about 30% more software every year. Now, one of the things we learned along the way is the discipline of setting in place a service level and a service catalog, because we had to shift the mindset of engineers from I can get whatever I want in the configuration to test to I have to design my test to match the configurations I can get. And I think that particular lesson is generic to any software development environment, getting the developers to recognize they have to operate within constraints of the infrastructure rather than the infrastructure adapting itself to the application. But it's been a great boon to us and actually has accelerated the cycle time on our software.
So the Natural Resource Agency consists of 28 organizations, and through the state consolidation, we've started off consolidating them from a physical standpoint. What we've done now over the last 12 months is we moved into internal private cloud services and what we call internal public cloud services. We're also exploring managed cloud services and some public cloud services, and I'll cover those in a little bit more detail. On basically what we define within the resource agency, we call it vCloud services, and that allows for infrastructure as a service to all of our departments. So we provide servers, operating systems, storage, memory, network, security, and monitoring, basically as a virtual cloud service that they can then manage their own application layers within there. We also then, what we define as our agency public cloud services is more around platform as a service. So we have things like SharePoint, we have GIS services there. We also provide a SOA environment that makes everything interoperable. So those are inside of our Tier 3 data center, and there are cloud services that are reserved for the resource agency departments. We're now currently doing some prototyping and working with some of the private vendors around managed cloud services. And we're looking at things like disaster recovery, backup and recovery, looking at things like potentially using those for high performance computing and other types of things that we want to scale up and down quickly. We also currently use some public cloud services at a very reduced cost for things like constituent websites and things that really don't have to have any major security around them. And then within our cloud model, it encompasses all that, and we're very positive and very much looking forward to Ron's effort from the OTEC cloud services, because we believe that that will replace some of the managed services that we're looking at from a private vendor. We can move them into the state data center, so we're looking very much forward to that being part of our cloud model. So we've shown that it works, and it's paid a lot of dividends from both a cost standpoint, but more importantly, what it does, it allows us to be able to provide the flexibility to our business. So we moved to the cloud services because the business drivers were around being able to provide the 2 C's, technology capabilities and technology capacity, in a very flexible mannerism. Because with the consumerization of IT, with the business demands that our business departments are putting on us, there's no way, and I won't use the H word, there's no way that we can basically keep up with that demand unless we employ a different model. So cloud model was part of that strategy. And then what I just described is what we call our hybrid agency model.
Great, thanks, guys. So it just was touched on just a little bit, but what were some of the things that you did to create the service that was compelling enough for people to want to join it, right? Very few of you can arm wrestle someone into saying you have to be a part of our organization. Sometimes that's easier in the commercial world, but what are some of the things that drove people to want to be a part of your shared resources?
For us, it was really that we have a number of departments, but they're small. They don't have a lot of IT resources. So that basically IT was constraining the business of their department. So in order to meet the business demands, we had to really look at pooling our resources. And so cost, but more importantly, it was the capacity that drove them to it and the flexibility. By doing a cloud service internally, they don't have the same process that they had to go through before if they had to do a CapEx purchase. So now everything's done through an interagency agreement. So the flexibility and the ability to, one of the things that enticed them is that they would still have the autonomy to do what they wanted with these resources. And I think, so that was a difference than trying to impose the will on them. This is what you get. You pay for it, you manage it, you do what you want. At the same token, by offering up the public shared services in the agency, that reduced their project costs. So those who wanted but couldn't afford to use SharePoint as a business enabler could use that as a platform that was already existing. And so that would reduce their project cost, CapEx, by about 40%.
Wow, great.
There was one thing we did. I had the advantage of telling people that eventually they were not going to get access to their own dedicated hardware, which I admit was a nice hammer. But still, everyone was reluctant to participate in this shared model to begin with. And so the hook or the bait we used was, if you come in early, you'll be part of defining the service catalog. And so the standard set of services that you have to design your test against will be more aligned with the ones you've already created, so it's less work for you if you join in early. So that was, and then everybody else who followed late had to make greater adaptation to fit in with the service catalog we defined.
For us, it was more of when this first started, the need was to share GIS layers, to share GIS data, planning and permitting data. It kind of grew into, okay, here are the other areas, problems, how can we meet the need? So instead of us building a network that, we're going to build a network for this problem, the problems kind of came at us, and we built the network around the problems. Everybody was asking us, how do I get on? Where do we sign? There's a lot of interest for us. Like I said, it started out with public safety and GIS. As well as it turned into dispatching, internet access. We didn't really care what went over the internet, the infrastructure. It's basically if it solved the need. Clovis Unified's need was, hey, I've got T1s out there. I can do this, faster and cheaper if you hook this up to the Fresno County Office of Education, where we get our internet access. And so we gave them from T1s. We went to fiber-based. For our video policing, there were areas that they needed infrastructure. We have cameras all over the city, about 90 to 100 cameras for video policing. We were able to tie the cameras into the system. So the needs sort of kind of built the system, if you will, and we ended up trying to figure out how to get out there versus saying, oh, hey, once you use our infrastructure, you really need to come along. The county had a data center we hooked up. So there was a lot of things that came up. There's broadcast facilities in the area, which we're now getting ready to put broadcast facilities online. The local PEG channels is getting ready to broadcast over. And we've got a bus rapid transit. We're talking to a couple other cities who might want to host a disaster recovery center in our area because we've got the connectivity on the backbone for scenic. So, I mean, for us, is the needs were out there. The needs came at us, and we kind of worked. We're always looking for new opportunities. It wasn't just a one-way deal. We actually went looking for solutions as well. What this could be used for was kind of in the right place at the right time, and we built this thing around the needs that came to us.
So, some of you have touched on this a little bit, but what are some of the benefits that your organization? So, you're offering shared services to other people, but how did it benefit your organizations to do that? And were there any benefits that showed up that you weren't planning on, right? So, obviously, you don't just go out and do something, but how did it benefit your organization in ways different, maybe, than it would have the people that are taking advantage of your service?
I can start. For us, it basically, one of the things that we really didn't realize that we thought we had a decent relationship with all the entities, the county, the city, the school districts, but one of the things that came about was a better relationship, a good working relationship. We got to know the agencies, we got to know the players, we got to know the school districts. We developed better relationships with them, and so we all were able to sit down as a region and kind of solve some of the problems that were out there. I mean, that's a good non-tangible benefit. Well, it could be tangible. But the other benefit for us was the data sharing. We were able to share planning data with the county. we didn't have to host two different sets of databases. It was the dispatching. Our PD could talk to their PD, so they were able to share the information. So there are a lot of benefits, but I think one of the biggest ones is the collaboration and working together as a team and as a group, and just forming a committee that could solve a lot of the region's problems.
In the resource agency, it provided many benefits to the people we support, the business. That's where a lot of the benefits were found. The ability for them to ramp up new business opportunities, to address their large data needs, to basically allow them the flexibility to move quickly to meet our constituents of California's needs. From an IT perspective, what it really did, it made us take a closer look at how we were operating and broke some old mindsets. It forced some interdivisional, interdepartment collaboration. And I have a dual role as the agency CIO of the resource agency. That's very important because I don't think we can survive in the future without looking at people as a shared service. And so by looking at shared services from a technology standpoint, then re-looking at, instead of having IT departments having centers of services and center of excellence, I think we're going to have to move in that direction because it's going to be survival for us. Because we're not getting new positions in the state, the revenue is not going to change, so we have to address our operational needs different. So this started us on that movement. So it started us being more collaborative internally as an IT shop.
Yeah, I think just one other thing. We have a little different use case since I was able to control the environment, but what Tim talked about is the mindset toward the acceptability of shared services is such a critical breakthrough to get. We were able to do that, and to find a model where you could share the particular hardware, which nobody believed was possible. And when you can get people through that knothole, there's tremendous savings get unlocked.
So you talked about data sharing. What kind of governance did you build around that and standards?
So the question is, what kind of governance and standards did you set up around sharing of data?
Well, for in our case, we had a GIS users group. We had what's called the eGov group, and it was consisted of the City of Clovis, the County of Fresno, and the City of Fresno, and they got together and they developed the standards list, what they wanted to standardize on, and a whole set of. I can get some information to you. I don't have all the information, but it was a group decision to decide to standardize on what platform for them. So the model was the group set the standards and everybody abided by what the group had to say. It was an agreement. Like I said, we have an MOU in place that actually spells out some of the things that the agencies all agreed to.
Yeah.
This is to Jay. You talked about the case of City of Melrose, and they started out small to grow their cloud services, bringing in other cities and I believe so many counties in that as well. How did they? Actually, there's a two-part question. One was, how did they plan on growing in terms of revenues to bring money in to support the expansion? And how did they also look at staffing as it grew? Did they pull resources from the city, the county?
Good question. It's interesting. When I talked to George about this, the city model in Massachusetts is dominant. I mean, it goes back to the Revolutionary War, right? So 341 cities and counties don't really have as much power in Massachusetts. So it was city-to-city discussions. They started out by sharing just between us. There was a schools Department of Education. I think it was Melrose, and I think that was a little regional that they shared with the city resources. And then they went to the town of Essex, who was a little bit smaller a town, didn't have the degree of sophistication in the IT staff, and frankly, they were happy to give it up to let Melrose run it for them. And in terms of the staffing, with where these towns were small enough to begin with, that the infrastructure, sort of the smallest block of infrastructure that Melrose bought to serve their needs, I think they were using about 20% of it. So they had room to grow, and so they could easily take on Essex, they could easily take on additional ones to be able to operate that. And they didn't need to add any staff. It was straightforward enough to operate, and the model of services they were offering were so similar to what they offered for Melrose that it wasn't a question of a whole bunch of complexity which required the staffing. It was just more of the same. So it's pretty straightforward to manage.
Can I add something to Atlas's question?
Yes.
So one of the lessons learned for us was the operational model. One of the difficult we still struggle with is how to resource a shared environment. You know, because we need to can't just put all that emphasis on one of my departments. So how do we set up a matrix organization where we can bring others in and, you know, deal with the color of money in the state and so forth. So, you know, it's the operational model now that we want to mature around our shared services. We found that the technology pieces weren't the difficult pieces. It's how do we change our mode of operation, and how do I get my other CIOs and directors to understand it's the sum of the whole. It isn't just about this person, PY belongs to you. This PY can support everybody, and we can get a great scale of economy. So that's a cultural thing that I think we have to work on to get the benefits of true shared services.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
So, in general, how do you handle conflicts when there are resource constraints? You've got, you know, 10 groups that feel like they own part of the infrastructure, and you've only got enough resources to deal with 8 of them.
So in the case of the way we set up the internal private vCloud is we change. We're not going to put ourselves into an operational model. We are service provider. So through virtualization provisioning, we'll provision you the computer resources you need to your IT department. Your IT department then works with their business department to apply those resources. So for instance, we will do that. We will go up to the patching level at the OS and so forth, but we don't get into the application layers. So we operate more as a service provider, as infrastructure as a service, but you, as the consumer, you manage that and you apply it how you want. So that's one of the ways we didn't get that operational drain.
Yeah.
It's elastic. Basically, what we do, we set up an open-ended internal agreement, and basically says that they project out 3 years of what some of their capacity needs is, and then they simply request a provisioning service, and then we provision that to them. So it doesn't have to go through a big. So it's basically pretty elastic. We maintain that. We don't do the self-provisioning yet, because one of the things we want to do is have a control gate to ensure that, you know, maybe there's an opportunity. So we're using that control gate still as an opportunity to educate. Well, you know, if you're going to put that type of application there, do you know there's we have that available to you in the private cloud service that could be cheaper? So it's kind of an educational control gate, not a financial control gate. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, but I'm looking from a state of California perspective. There was a question in an earlier discussion along the lines of, you know, how does a customer define their budget? Right? You know where I'm going with it.
So basically, you know, we look at the IT departments as consumers to us as a service provider, and basically they need to look at capacity planning, working with their business and needs. Now, the beauty about the model is it's an internal agency agreement. So we are the custodians of that. So then they can basically just say, hey, I need this. They get it, and then they get charged, you know, in the rears, versus getting charged up front. So from their budget standpoint, they still have to do their budget work. You know, we don't manage their budget. But the beauty about it is they don't have as much overhead in the areas of procurement, and they don't have to have the procurement lag because there's already an existing agreement that allows them to operate within. So they don't have to worry about going outside and doing any procurement 3-4 months.
And if they happen to use more resources
Then they give me
budget for?
Then they give me money. they have bake sales and collect cans.
And would you say, too, that one of the other advantages is they can turn up those services, right? So a lot of times you budget things, and then you get the equipment, and then it takes months to put it all together and, get it on the network and make it work, whereas now you can procure it and it's there, and you start your project 3 months earlier.
One of the things we do struggle with in the state of California from a state organization is right now we have no mechanism to procure on demand with vendors. So capacity planning and right sizing becomes really critical. And I know that both CTA and DGS is looking at that as we look at how to align procurement mechanisms with this new cloud direction. So I know they're taking a hard look at that right now. So, but in the meantime, there are ways to mitigate those things by looking at creating some open-ended interagency agreements that you can continue just to use. Okay.
It was interesting in the shared model that we deployed. We started out with a communist model where people basically could reserve the resources they think they were going to need, and it was immediately people perceived there was going to be a shortage, and they would reserve something for 3 weeks that they only needed for 4 days, and we quickly realized that this is not going to work. But without a chargeback model of some way to make them pay for it, we realized that it wasn't going to work. So we don't have a chargeback model inside the company, but we do have a discipline of you have to be able to tear your setup, has to be able to go up and down within about 4 hours, and so generally people will hold it for a couple of days, and that's enough. But we had to enforce that through old-fashioned means.
Another question for you guys is, obviously you guys have done some things that are new. It's the first time you guys had rolled some of those things out. What are some things that you learned through going through the process that as you roll out your next shared service or you continue to grow this, what would you do differently, or would you, what would you do differently in the future?
For us, what we found, we have a high level of collaboration between the agencies. What is very important to do is to make sure everybody has a clear understanding and expectation of what you have out there and what's to be used. In our case, it was sharing, infrastructure sharing. So we laid out, okay, every agency is in charge of their own construction, their own security, their own maintenance, and basically you're just talking about two different entities: the City of Fresno and the City of Clovis, because that's where most of the fiber is. But there is also a piece that comes off the fiber, which you drop off to the county or whatnot. But in our experience, we need to be very clear and make sure not only that you're clear what your expectations are, but make sure that they understand it. It's both ways. If they don't understand or they have a different understanding than you do, then that could be a problem. But that was for us going down the road. It was clear expectations was the biggest thing for us.
Three things. One would probably be a better job of communication and education. As we rolled out these approaches and these new philosophies, I worked through the chief information officers of those departments. Kind of lessons learned, I think what we should have did more roundtables with those departments' engineers and technologists that were in the CTO levels, so they would have a better understanding of the opportunities that from an engineering standpoint they could take advantage of. So I think we would have went deeper in our communication and our education efforts if we had to do it again, and so we're going to make those corrections. The second thing is I think that would have been more aggressive in taking a look at a contribution model to the operational teams. Right now, there's predominantly one department that's carrying the load for the shared services, and while we do have within the shared service costs, there are labor costs. That in itself, I would like to adjust that so that the philosophy of people as a shared services and departments that have 25, IT employees, maybe they should be contributing more to worrying about application development and so forth. So looking at the people aspect from an operational model, we would have did differently. And what else, Atlas? Those were the two big ones on my thing. So for lessons learned.
I think in addition to some kind of a bill back or a show back or a charge back model, the one thing we learned doing this is we wanted to be too helpful in terms of the range of options in the service catalog. and we ended up with more choices, which created complexity in the configurations, which became expensive to manage. And we had to dial that back, and dialing it back was painful. So my lesson was I would start with 1 or 2 options in the service catalog and only expand them when there's a compelling volume of demand for that type of a model. Really be stingy with choices of complexity.
Any other questions out there? I have a few more, but I want to give people an opportunity to ask.
I have a question for the audience.
Yeah.
What does cloud do? Why does it intrigue you?
We'll go alphabetically.
The reason I bring that up because I believe that you will be doing some form of cloud, but your alignment of your choices have a value add to your business, and they have to take into consideration the business drivers that you support, the regulations, the security levels. Not everyone has those same levels of things. So whether you go private, public, hybrid, internal, I think that just make sure that you do an internal analysis of your own business needs, and you take a hard look at your own internal information technology capabilities today and tomorrow, because business isn't stopping and time to market is increasing. So those are the things I would expect while you're here.
I would share the reason I'm here is that I'm technology for a huge county with a very small population, and that's County. 13 districts, some as small as 40 students. An ability for those districts to do what they need to do technologically, and they continuously look more and more to us. And where would we look for a solution like the cloud? And I mean, we started several years ago on the virtualization path, and we're well along that. And we just keep getting hammered by our districts for solutions for them as well as for ourselves.
I think I'd like to add to that. I used to work for another department, which I will not name. But I think if a lot of organizations don't see this cloud as part of the future, they'll find that their users are going to gravitate. And Jay mentioned this before in his session. They're going to jump on the Googles of the world to do what they need to do. They're going to go to the Dropbox of the world, or they're going to go to Amazon. They're going to go to wherever they can to get to get services that the organizations can't give them, or can't give them as fast as they'd like them, or can't give them at the cost they'd like to have them. So I think that's a real challenge, and another reason for the cloud.
Yeah, I liked what Jay said. You might want to repeat it. Some people might not have been that, but just the idea that outside forces are determining what people are wanting or expect, right?
Yeah, the fact that consumers of IT have a choice, and if it's a small school district, if they can't get what they need from their named IT provider, and they've got some enterprising student who wants to write an application and run it in Amazon, they can go do it. And it takes a credit card and a phone call, not even a phone call these days, right? So it's easy to do. And we had an experience at NetApp where our founder moved his entire home directory into Dropbox. And it's about 2.5 years ago, I had the advantage of being there when he told the CIO he'd done this. And literally, you could watch somebody have an aneurysm. But the fact he could do it, you can't stop it. As an IT provider, you can't stop it. All you can do is embrace it and provide alternatives that fit within the governance and compliance mechanisms you have to live with. And employees are willing to live within that if you can provide them the service. But it's a challenge.
I think what we're seeing is sales organizations for some of these providers giving a pie-in-the-sky kind of a view to our business customers. And then what we're seeing is a bit of a scattering across same functionality over several different technologies and several different vendors. And we're trying to have an enterprise architecture that standardizes same functions over similar applications. So the ability to support this stuff becomes harder. So maybe we see cloud-based solutions in order to have a platform-by-platform cost reduction in order to provide competing services.
Yeah, I think,
That's kind of why.
it's an interesting comment. A lot of IT infrastructure grows organically, sort of application by application, project by project, and project-based purchasing. And often it's easier just to walk away from the complexity and I'll buy that application as a service. And I think it's a very viable approach to go. As an infrastructure vendor, it doesn't really help me that much, but I think it's a very viable approach. And the challenge for the vendors is to come together and to simplify the management and be able to, if you do a refresh of 7 or 8 different projects worth of infrastructure into something which is consolidated, easier to manage, and expandable, that can also be a money saver.
Well, that's the key. You prove a concept on some small scale, and then you see it being cascaded out.
Yep.
So my answer to why the cloud is because at the growth rate of IT, you couldn't get enough floor space to put single boxes, one each, or maybe half a dozen running a particular application. You just couldn't buy floor space and cooling fast enough. And so that was the big driver for virtualization. You've got virtualization, there's a whole tool set to dramatically increase your efficiency as long as you're willing to do some standardization. You've got virtualization, standardization, poof, you've got a cloud.
And you got to deal with the operational differences
Yeah.
to exploit that. But that's right. Those are the first 2 steps.
Yeah. But it's really unsustainable without it.
One of the challenges when our customers go out and get these services through Google or any place else is 6 months later somebody comes up with the bright idea that needs to integrate with our internal systems.
Oh, yeah.
So now that's where you say, hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's why one of the things as you're considering or undertaking how you architect and employ a cloud into your environment, that hybrid cloud, do not forget about standardization. And I'm not talking about standardization at the hardware level or the product level. I'm talking about at the interoperability level, at the protocol levels. Those will save you because that's how you create flexibility in a technology environment. Technology is going to leapfrog. It's that you need that interoperability architecture layer that abstracts you from some things. So as you look at your your cloud models, make sure that you're addressing that, because if you do that, then you're going to be okay.
I had a conversation with a customer about a year ago someone in his company, what department, had moved an analytics application and bought a couple of virtual machines at Amazon and moved some data up there, continued to grow. And it got to the point where it was pretty expensive, and they realized it would be cheaper to move it back in-house. They had to incur all the cost of moving the data again. His observation was that it was probably the right thing to do, because if the application had gone nowhere, that was the cheapest way to get started with it. But the fact that it took off made it very expensive. And he observed that things like Amazon and these public cloud services, they reduce the cost of failure, but they significantly increase the cost of success. And so there's a judgment call you make along the way of when do you use the cloud and when do you do it in-house.
I would venture to say that if you look at organizations in government, that they probably spend from their IT total cost as much on a non-production environment as they do production environments. And there's statistics on that. So one of the things that if you are interested in cloud to reduce your overall, application cost and opportunity cost, take a look at that from the development and testing area, because you can do that a lot cheaper in develop and test, and then but you can keep the production inside if you're not comfortable. So there's a lot of spent on non-production environments, and there's a lot of overhead in trying to back those up and do things. So that's a good area to start with a low risk.
Especially for an application you want to try out and offer trial of services to constituents or consumers, but you don't know if it's going to grow. Is it worth buying the infrastructure to run it? It's a great way to do it in the cloud.
Any other questions? What about growth? How do you guys deal with growth, right? I mean, I think we just talked a little bit about that. Once you realize something's successful, bringing it in-house might be good, but do you guys have things in place to help you predict growth or not be caught by surprise that, sometimes the biggest, difficulties when you're so successful that you can't keep up with your own success and then you sort of fail in sort of a way. How do you guys protect against growth you didn't expect, or how do you not get unexpected growth?
I'll start with that one. It's the particular application I talked about of consolidating test equipment. We were trying to shrink, not grow, and so as we needed more equipment in the consolidated test lab, we'd basically grab some of the groups that had held back their equipment by the ankles and shake it out of their pockets. But what we also realized is that ultimately, as we needed to grow again with having a standardization and having sort of templates set up for how you will grow, how you will manage it, allows us to increase capacity within the same application set without really increasing much cost. We could predict that, we could deploy it fast, we could manage it with the same people, and so we had a little bit of capital cost, but it was the minimum incremental cost to grow because we had standardized.
Dave, I think that's catch-22 because in a public sector IT shop, your job is to provide services for the business and the mission. And if they grow, that means that the capacity they need and the capabilities they need is going to grow. And in the area of data, as you heard at the keynote this morning, Moore's Law, that data is just going to keep growing, doubling every year. And so, I think there are areas that you need to look at different strategies around because there are things that you can't control because that's business and consumer driven, and data is one of those. So that's where you look at cloud and hybrid solutions to how do you effectively place that stuff and reuse that stuff cost effectively and at a better operational model. So those are kind of things like that. And then in the area of hardcore infrastructure, so it's reusability. The reason everyone went to virtualization is because we all know in the physical world we were only using 30% of the capacity we were putting in. So it's to drive the density up, but you can only drive the density up if you're willing to share boxes. If you get back to this is mine, and you're not willing to share resources at non-peak times of yours with some other client and to split the cost, then you're back in the same old mode. So it's not just the technology. You got to rethink your own cultures and how do you address this. So I think that's the part that we also need to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for us, growth is a little bit more difficult. We provide the infrastructure more than we do the services. Well, some services, but we overbuilt to start with. But what we need to do is it's a cost structure for us. If it makes sense to put the new service or the new application on the network, then we can do it. It's just a matter of cost. So growth for us is hard. We are also public agency, which we don't serve the general public, or we don't have customers or private customers. So we are kind of finite in who we serve and how we serve. The services come up, and there's some things that we didn't expect that we'd have, such as broadcasting and internet service providing. But excuse me. For us, it's a matter of looking at the cost benefit of putting something into place, and if something's there, and getting to it, and how costly it is.
Well, thanks, you guys. I think that's what we wanted to cover here. So appreciate your questions and being here to listen and bring your input as well. And thanks, panel, for sharing with us some of the things you guys have learned. It's very helpful.
Very nice.